So much does it cost to live in a van or RV? Well, the short answer, the truthful answer is it depends a whole lot on your own individual circumstances. But in this video, I'll share my own experiences with living in a van or car. It's a question that I'm asked frequently. How much does this lifestyle cost? And I think this question makes sense. Sometimes people kind of disparage it and say, hey, you got to figure out your own thing. Why are you asking that kind of thing? You should know what your expenses are, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's a fair question. It makes sense when people ask because if you're not used to doing this, if you're used to living in a traditional living a traditional lifestyle in a traditional residence, in a house or apartment, whatever, you may look at this and think, well, vacations are so expensive for most people. How on earth do you do this? Aren't most full-time van dwellers and RVers just permanently on vacation, doing all the stuff like you do on vacation? And the answer is no. The answer to that is no. That's not the case for most full-time, long-time nomads, van dwellers, RVers, whatever. Now, are there some? Sure, absolutely, and they do burn an incredible amount of money. But for most of us, at least the people I know that I've met, there's some concern about budget, and it's a lifestyle more than like a vacation. So you're not just going around spending a ton of money at all the tourist sites. In fact, in my experience, most full-timers, van dwellers, RVers, even those who come from professional backgrounds and have some kind of retirement in addition to Social Security and maybe a pension, whatever, they're still conscious of costs and they still try to live frugally and they take advantage of the reduction in housing costs, the significant reduction in housing costs for many of us to make their budget work while they end up in being able to enjoy a higher standard of living than they would if they were spending a fortune on housing back in staying in one place. So I've talked in a video a while ago about, in a general sense, about the cost of living for full-time travelers. But in this video, I'm going to share my actual numbers. I've been tracking them. I've been tracking my expenses for several years. Mostly, there's been a few times where I got out of it for a while, for a month or several. But for the most part, I'm tracking for several years, so I can give you some pretty accurate numbers based on my experience. And of course, your mileage may vary on this. We'll point those areas out where that's likely to happen, but at least you can see in a real example of what it costs for me to do this. Hey, if we're just meeting, my name is Robert Witham. I am just a guy who has had a lifelong love affair with the open road, and I don't think I've ever passed up a road trip in my entire life. I also happen to be a minimalist and have been for many, many years, a couple decades now, and the byproduct of that is that when the road trip opportunity becomes available, I can take advantage of it. So that's just me. That's who I am. This channel is about the traveling lifestyle. The people, the places, and the kind of behind-the-scenes nitty-gritty how-to make this all work. So if you're not subscribed to the channel already, please consider hitting that subscribe button, ring the bell, so YouTube will hopefully let you know when I publish new videos. I try and put up a couple videos a week about the traveling lifestyle. And if you're interested in following along otherwise, my social media links are in the video description below. Robert Witham, most places, Nomad Travel Reporter on Facebook. So without further ado, let's dive into the nitty-gritty, and I'll share with you what I spend myself on a typical month living on the road full-time. I'm self-employed, so this does not include my business expenses. That's kind of a separate category because that's a business expense. So this is what I spend after my business expenses and taxes and things, just like you might spend after taxes if you have a regular traditional job. I do want to note, too, this is based on these expenses that I'm going to share with you based on traveling in a van. It's an older model van, but low mileage and very well maintained, and it gets reasonable gas mileage. Your expenses will be higher in a RV if you're going to travel in an RV, and that's primarily gas and maintenance. Your insurance costs may be similar, they may be a little lower, but you're going to spend a lot more on gas and you're going to spend a lot more on maintenance, and I mean both the mechanical maintenance of the vehicle and the maintenance of the house part of the vehicle. That's fine as long as you know that, but it's going to be higher than mine when it comes to maintenance and gas. So if you want to lower your costs even further, you're concerned about what these numbers I'm going to throw out, consider traveling in a minivan or maybe even a car to lower costs further. I've seen more people this year in the desert traveling, and I point that out because nomads congregate here. I'm all over the country in the summer, so is everybody else. We get congregated here. So during the summer, you're not really sure always. You still in a van with reflectix and stuff, you kind of know they're a van dweller. But, see when you're camping in a tent or the car, you don't really know if they're a full-timer or if they're just on vacation. So I've seen more people in the desert this year, though, where people do congregate in cars and tents than I've ever seen. So that is a growing thing, too. It's not as comfortable as a minivan, for sure, but it's even cheaper, and maybe you've already got a car, and that's the way you can get started. So if you are trying to lower the costs, I'm not trying to talk you into it. It's just saying if you're trying to lower the costs, that is an option, and that's a good way to lower the costs. RV being more expensive, van less expensive, minivan or car even less expensive yet. All right, so my fixed monthly expenses, that's things like auto insurance, my cell phone, and some apps and services I pay for every month are less than $300 a month. That does not include gas and food and some other irregular expenses. Now, I've worked hard over a long period of time to pare my minimum expenses to this level. I know it's possible. It would be possible for a lot of people to go lower than where I'm at. That includes full coverage on my van. That's a worthy expense to me. If something does happen, that gives me glass coverage, rental coverage, roadside assistance, and reimbursement for at least some portion of the vehicle to help me get restarted with something else. So that's a worthy expense to me. My phone, that you can get that cheaper too if you want, but again, with my business, it's a worthy expense for me. But having pared my expenses to less than $300 a month for my fixed expenses is the reason I'm able to travel full time while pursuing the work that I find rewarding and fulfilling. I couldn't do what I do if I spent money like the average American spends money. It wouldn't be possible. All right, so how about a breakdown of where that all comes from? My phone is actually my single largest, biggest monthly fixed expense right now. That's because it has a phone payment. I just upgraded my phone to a new iPhone. Mine was 4 years old, and it was definitely needed to be upgraded. Because of that, I also pay some insurance on it every month so that am not out the full ridiculous amount of money this thing costs if it's lost or stolen or damaged. So once that's paid off, that will be back down below $100 a month. You can get cheaper on prepaids plans. It's not worth it for me. This is my business. Requires me being online, having a good data connection, and you will get deprioritized behind postpaid customers if you're using a prepaid plan. Now, that may not matter depending where you travel, but if you spend a lot of time in places that are crowded with nomads and tourists, that becomes a big deal if you're trying to rely on it for your business. So if it works for you to use prepaid, there's a lot of options. I've done that myself in the past. I don't do it now because it's not worth it for my business. But yeah, there's definitely a place you can save some money there. That's what mine is, though, and that includes a payment and insurance. That's about $150 a month I'm paying for that. For now, it'll go down. Auto insurance is like $83 a month. That is a third higher than what I paid in Wyoming because I just moved to Nevada. I could get less if I just wanted liability insurance, but I'm not willing to do that because I want that protection. And the deal with the Nevada insurance, it actually went up almost double. I had to pare back my coverage. It's liability and uninsured driver. That's uninsured motorist, underinsured motorist. That's the deal there. That's almost all of my monthly expense. I pay $15 a month for comp, collision, glass, rental, roadside assistance, and the rest of it is for the liability and the underinsured motorists. So that's what the bulk of the expense is. So I would save very little money by dropping the coverage, and for $15 a month, that's enough value for me that I'm going to spend that extra little bit. Something to be aware of, though, if you are moving to Nevada, I have been told by local residents that it is cheaper the further you get from Las Vegas. And Clark County, where Las Vegas is even more expensive than Nye County, where I'm based these days. So just to be aware of that if you're looking at moving your address because you are a new nomad. Then I spend about $25 a month on apps and services like YouTube Premium. That does two big things for me. I don't have to watch ads, and it allows me to download videos onto my mobile device, or iPhone or a tablet or anything, while I'm on Wi-Fi in town, so that I can watch them offline without burning up my cell data. I pay like $1 a month for iTunes storage so I can have more room for backups on my phone, which comes in really handy when you have to upgrade your phone or if anything breaks or anything like that. I pay $13 something a month for Amazon Prime. Again, as a nomad, that's a huge value just because of the shipping costs alone. There's a bunch of other things come with it, but it's the shipping thing is the big deal for me, that I get free 2-day shipping anywhere in the country. Sometimes it's next day, depending on where I'm at. Then I spend like $1.50 a month on a note-taking app that syncs across my computer and my phone, and also provides a lot of value for me. So those three big things, Verizon, auto insurance, and apps and services, are less than $300 a month. Those are my fixed costs, and I pay the same thing every month. Fuel is a big one. That's my next biggest category, or food, depending on the month. Fuel can go, for me, looking at my recent transactions over this year, over the course of 2019, that's been anywhere between $125 and $400 per month. That's going to vary, of course, based on the fuel efficiency of your vehicle and the miles you are driving. Those $400 months were like, I think one was when I was in Oregon, and I did a lot of driving, and some of that was business. I was doing a trip for Meanderings Magazine to shoot a lot of stuff in Oregon, so that pushed that up. And the other one was in September, when I went from Wyoming to Nevada. I think at the end of September or 1st of October, I got to Nevada. So that was my big trip, my big annual migration, and it just happened to fall in 1 month as opposed to being broken out to a couple. But then in October or November, when I was in Nevada, and I basically stayed put for a while, I spent like $125 for a month. So it does vary. And that's my experience with a vehicle that gets reasonable gas mileage. So like I said, if you're driving a minivan, you're probably going to spend less depending on your miles. You're driving an RV, you're going to spend more depending on your miles. Food, on average, I spend about $300 a month. I've been working diligently over the past year to get away from restaurants and do my own cooking, which is both healthier and cheaper. So this number is going to vary for you depending on whether the kind of food you're buying and whether you're cooking in your van or RV or eating in restaurants. But I find around $300 a month to be a consistent, reliable number that allows me to eat healthy food and not be eating junk. Now, you can eat all garbage canned goods. You can eat ramen noodles every day, but you'll save money this month, but you're going to pay for that in the long run in terms of your health. So I don't feel like that's a good trade-off. All right, now speaking of food, a couple of other subcategories. These are included in that $300. I spend about $10 a month on drinking water. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. If I'm in town somewhere and I have access to good water, I can fill up that way for free. Otherwise, sometimes it's even more expensive, even a little more expensive. But it depends on how much you're going through a month. I generally budget a gallon a day. I can usually find that anywhere between 20 and 40 cents a gallon for filtered water that's good for drinking. So you can also filter your own if you want to go that route. I have a cooler. I do not have a 12-volt refrigerator. Someday I will get the refrigerator, but I have to upgrade the electrical before I can do the refrigerator. And so I have a cooler to keep perishables fresh, and I spend about $20 to $30 a month on average on that. If I'm in Pahrump, for example, I can get 20 pounds of ice bulk at a machine for $1.50. Other places in rural areas, I've seen ice at $3 and $4 for 10 pounds. So there's some variation there depending on where you're at and how much you need. I have a smaller cooler that's one of those roto-molded ones that's super efficient. So, it does pretty good. I can usually keep ice 3 to 4 days depending on temperature. And when I say 3 to 4 days, I mean usable. I'll have ice in there for about a week, but the temperature where the food is not cold enough to be safe storage. So, I find it practical to refill it every 3 or 4 days, and a little bit. Sometimes I get a little bit longer if it's really cool. So, $20 to $30 a month is kind of my experience. That a little higher in the summer when it's 90 degrees every day, just the way it is. Auto maintenance is an irregular category. It's a terrible challenge to budget for because you may spend nothing on maintenance for months and then have a huge bill. Over the past 3 months, I've averaged $133 per month, and over the past year, that's 2019, I've averaged about $125 a month on this van and the Echo I had previously. I do some of my own auto maintenance, not all of it, so that does help keep that number down. And I have both of those vehicles I had were very reliable, well-maintained vehicles, which helps as well. So, you may go up and down on that, but that's kind of been my experience. If I had to throw out a number to budget, I'd say I'd say like $200 a month is probably a real safe number to be saving for Auto repairs, that gives you enough put away that if you run into a couple of bigger repairs in the same year, you can actually cover it and not be broke. Mine's been 125 to 133 over the past 3 to 12 months. So, but I would. There are things that could happen that would make that higher. Last year we had to put a transmission in the Toyota Echo, and that was pricey. So that may have, but I think across the course of the year, it was probably we put a used transmission in, so it's probably a little bit higher than that. For the year, I might have been like maybe 150 for the year, 150 a month, 175 a month for the year, including a transmission replacement. So, entertainment, I spend almost nothing on entertainment. I just don't. I can easily entertained, I guess. Clothing, again, almost nothing. Every once in a while, I'll buy some new shirts, but I don't spend much on clothing. Medical, I probably spend less than $500 a year. On medical health care and stuff. I try to doctor myself and limp along. I do have a professional background in healthcare, so that kind of helps. I also have some relatives who work in healthcare, so I can kind of pick their brains when I need advice. But I'm not recommending you do that, but that's what I'm doing these days. So there you go. Category gifts, I don't really track that very good. There's irregular stuff like vehicle registration and driver's licenses. In November, I spent $114.75 on registering my van and getting my driver's license in Nevada. It will be less in 2020 because I wanted my license on there, and that was like $42 or something. And there'll be a couple other new registration fees that will not be in there, so that'll be less. If you got to pay sales tax on your registration, or if you've got to pay, certain, like Nevada, like Montana and Wyoming, where I live, the registration is based on the value of the vehicle that is new, and then the age of the vehicle. So if you're registering a new or several-year-old vehicle that has a very high value, you can expect to spend a lot more. One of the advantages of driving older vehicles is that they tend to be less expensive to register in the states I've been living in recently, at least. And there's some miscellaneous things, household things that come up each month that varies month to month. Paper towels, improvements around the van, laundromat fee expenses, that kind of things. So adding it all up, I'm kind of at $750 to $800 minimum per month. That includes my fixed expenses, food, fuel, and so on. You can spend more than this based on your fuel usage. Again, if you're in a gas guzzling vehicle, you drive a lot of miles, you're going to spend more on fuel. Food, if you eat out a lot or buy a lot of expensive foods for your vehicle, you'll spend more. Auto maintenance can vary, that can have a big impact. Miscellaneous household stuff, entertainment, rent, and camping fees. I don't do that too often. I do once in a while. If you're paying that rent or camping fees daily, every day or most days, that's going to add up quickly. Remember too that you absolutely will have unplanned expenses. So we may say $750 or $800 is a minimum, but unplanned things come along, like vehicle repairs, medical bills, interrupted income, and what have you. And I know some people are like they don't want to spend money on medical. I don't either. You get a nasty tooth or ache or something, break a tooth, or end up with an emergency, end up with the ER and have to get medicine or whatever. You're going to have to pay for that. One way or another. So these things do come up sometimes, even if you don't use these things a lot. Even if you do your own vehicle repairs most of the time, you don't go to the doctor hardly ever. Sometimes stuff comes up, and so that will mess up the budget those months. A couple is going to spend more than a single person, obviously, but probably not double. So just tack on the extra food, clothing, healthcare, whatever you need there. My recommendation, even though I just showed you that my actual month-to-month expenses are around $750 or $800, my actual recommendation is to plan on around $1,500 per month if you're living frugally, and by that I mean not paying rent, often cooking at home, limiting your mileage, avoiding debt, and what have you, because there's extra things that happen that you have to deal with, and it's just a lot easier to deal with that if you have a little extra money each month. It's possible to spend closer to $800 though, or even less with extreme frugality. And when I say extreme frugality, I'm just meaning you're going to be cooking all your meals inexpensively in the van or RV. You're limiting your driving to conserve fuel. You're performing maintenance on your own vehicle maybe. You're avoiding camping fees. You're looking for free entertainment instead of paying for things. You're avoiding vices like alcohol, tobacco. Maybe using a prepaid phone plan with a cheap device. There's places you can cut expenses and get it down below that. Even still, stuff comes up. So minimum expenses, in my opinion, around $600 to $800 a month. Mine are like $750 to $800 a month. $1,500 is just a lot more comfortable. If you can do that, $1,200, $1,500, I think it's going to be a lot more comfortable. That's going to give you some flexibility to do things. And do more things and not have to worry about if you can afford it. It gives you a little buffer for the car repairs. It gives you a buffer for a night or two in a hotel because the weather is just terrible, or because your van broke down and you can't stay at the shop where it's getting fixed, whatever it is. It just gives you some margin to deal with. So if you're able to, that's kind of like the absolute minimum you got to have, I think, in my experience. But if you're at the absolute minimum, you're not saving any money for things that go wrong, and that's kind of a bad spot to be in. So I try and make sure you've got something you're able to save every month, because things do go wrong. And like I said, it's going to be slightly higher for a couple or someone with debt, chronic medical problems, other things like that require extra expenses above what we talked about in this video. So nomads, I want to know, what's your take on minimum monthly expenses? If you're out here doing this for any length of time, what's your take on the minimum? You don't have to tell us exactly what you spend every month. We're not worried about that, but what's your take on the minimum? How low could you go? In other words, if necessary, if you had to pare your budget down, what do you think's the minimum you can get by on, and still, keep gas in the rig and food in the cupboards? But anyway, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you found this information helpful when it comes to planning and considering whether the nomadic lifestyle, the traveling lifestyle, might be right for you. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing so you can be notified when I publish new videos. And if you think some of your friends or family might find this interesting, please consider sharing this on social media. And speaking of social media, look below in the video description if you want to find links to follow along with me on social media as well. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube are all Robert Witham, and on Facebook it's at Nomad Travel Reporter. So thanks again for joining me in this video, everybody. We will catch you in the next one.